today we're going to be looking at Kusto and the Kusto query language. Honestly, this thing is not hard. You'll probably hear it on this video because you've seen Kusto and you may have seen Analytics Workspaces, got a little confused and, well, searched for a solution. We'll stick with our normal process here, the KISS method. Keep it simple, stupid. So, what is Kusto? Where does it come from? What's it used for? It was originally developed by Microsoft for querying big data and big data analytics. So Kusto is inherently linked with this thing here. This is something called Azure Data Explorer. Now, Azure Data Explorer is designed to take inputs of, well, data, big or small data. I mean big data. What I really mean is things like CSV files, JSON files, Avro files, ORC files, text files, something that contains data, and there is a lot of it. We're talking terabytes, petabytes, whatever it might actually be. And you want to go and analyze that information and make sense of it. Data Explorer can do that for us, and we have something called a Data Explorer cluster. And what a Data Explorer cluster does in Azure is at the back end of it, it has linked up to it the Azure Machine Learning Workspaces and Azure Virtual Machines that actually do the compute and the processing on the information. But to query the information, we use this thing, Kusto, as a query language. You can think of Kusto in the same sort of sense as kind of like a SQL-like query language, but works in a little bit of a different way. It's a simpler way. You also find that Kusto is used and pops up in a number of different locations within cloud. It's not just this standard Azure Data Explorer system. You'll see Kusto pop up with Log Analytics, if I can spell, Workspaces. You see it pop up with Office 365. More to the point, Office 365 logs. You see it pop up within Azure Sentinel, and you can also see it actually pop up with Config Manager, which is no longer Config Manager, it's Endpoint Manager, but that's with a product in there called CM Pivot. Not too sure why they used Kusto for that, but still, somebody liked it at Microsoft, so they fancied it. So the most common sort of encounter that people hit is Log Analytics Workspaces. We're going to come back to this, but we will concentrate initially on this Data Explorer cluster. It sounds scary, it's really not, to be honest. Let's go check it out and have a look. So first of all, where does Kusto actually come from? What is the name Kusto? It comes from Jacques Kusto, who was a very famous French naval officer and oceanographer. Also the inspiration for a movie by Wes Anderson. I can remember what it was called now. Wes Anderson movies. What was it called now? There we go. The Life Aquatic with Steve Zissou. Good movie. So why is it called Kusto and based on Jacques Kusto? Because Jacques Kusto was an oceanographer and he explored oceans, and you are exploring a sea or exploring an ocean of data. So if I go and look into my Microsoft Azure over here and just jump to the home, you can go and create something called a Data Explorer cluster to use this to analyze information that you might have. Now, when you go and create one of these things, the wizard's pretty straightforward. I'm not going to run through this, but take note of this section, the compute specification. As I mentioned, these Data Explorer clusters, they have Machine Learning Workspaces and Azure Virtual Machines at the back end driving the queries that you actually write on your data. What that means is, when you end up with an Azure Data Explorer cluster, notice this is currently in a state of stopped, and there is a start button here. They cost a lot of money to run. Only turn them on when you need them, okay? Just bear this in mind if you go and create one yourself. Even if you create a very basic Azure Data Explorer cluster, you're going to burn through a lot of cache very quickly. Okay, so mine is actually stopped. But notice this Data Explorer cluster has a URI on the front end of it. Now, Microsoft are very, very nice to us with some things. Other things, not so much. But we have this concept here. This is Azure Data Explorer. Okay, so once you've built that Azure Data Explorer cluster thing, you actually go to the URL, and what you see is, well, this. Microsoft not only provide us with a free cluster to actually work with, which is nice, but they also provide us with this sample cluster. If you jump to this URL right here, the dataexplorer.azure.com/clusters/help/databases/samples, you will end up straight up in an Azure Data Explorer environment with a help cluster and some data to actually play with. So if we ignore logs, if we ignore everything else for the moment, what we can see down here in this sample database is we can see a selection of tables. So if we just drop down into this one here called storm events, right? This is just a table of data. There's nothing special about this information. If I just double click on that, I can go and run a query. And you've got query spaces up here, and we've got outputs down here. Okay, so if you just go and run storm events, all that does is it goes and returns a bunch of data for you. 60,000 records worth of data, a lot of information. All this is just a tableized data. It's a bunch of storms that happened in 2007 in America. That's it. Right, let's go and play with the data, because that's the whole point of Kusto. It's querying the data. Now, Kusto kind of works a little bit like PowerShell. So if you've ever gone and played with PowerShell and you've done something like get-service, helps if I can type, pipe where name dash like B star. There's all the services that begin with B. But I have this pipe here, very, very important. So a pipe inside PowerShell kind of takes the output of one command, in this case a list of all the services, and sends it into the input of the next command, in this case the where, which is going to filter this down to everything that starts with B. Kusto does the same thing. There's pipes all over Kusto. All right, so let's start with something very, very simple. So let's go to storm events and let's go to pipe. So we've got IntelliSense, we've got auto prediction. Kusto, being a rather complex query language, has a whole bunch of different operators. Here's the thing, you don't need to know them all. Okay, look, this is a data analytics tool. This is for big data. This is to do really fun, advanced data sciencey kind of stuff, if you really want to get into that. Your average systems administrator is never going to use all of that kind of information, okay? You don't need to drive a Formula One car just to be able to commute to work, because that's what you're going to be doing 99% of the time. So we're going to look at some very simple Kusto queries here that are going to be valid across all of those different things that Kusto is used for. So let's go and take some of these. Let's go and take project. Project's a good one. So within project, what I want to do is something like this. Project state, I'm going to project injuries direct, okay? And I'm going to project event type, all right? All of this is going to do is just select columns. That's it, boom, done. Selected state, selected injuries direct, and selected event type there. We've got things like water spouts and heavy rains and tornadoes and etc., etc., etc. Okay, so maybe we want to go and do some kind of analysis on this. Okay, let's do a summarize. Let's do a summarize equation here, and let's do injuries direct. Injuries, I can't spell. Injuries, there we go. Direct is equal to count, and we're going to do this by event type. Okay. And if we go and run that query, what we should have is there's the events, thunderstorm, wind, hail, flash, flood, yada yada, over that entire data set and the counts of those according injuries. So maybe we want to get a little bit more granular with this. So let's pop another pipe in here. Notice the pipes every single time. Yes, you could put this all on one line, but you're going to need a very widescreen monitor to do that. So yeah. So where state is absolutely equal to Florida, because all the fun, interesting things happen in the Sunshine State. Actually, is it the Orange State? Is California the Sunshine State? Either way, a lot of sunshine in Florida. So here we go. Thunderstorms, hails, flash, flood, drought, frost, freeze, flood, tornado, heavy rain, strong wind, etc., etc., etc. We've used project, we've used where, we've used summarize to bring that down a little bit. Let's do some sorting. Okay, so sort that data. We want to do that sorting by injuries direct. Okay, and let's go and run that information there. Hey, there we go, thunderstorms. Apparently, there is a lot of thunderstorms in Florida. So we've got thunderstorms, hail, lightning, heavy rain, drought, and so on and so forth. These are the injuries that have happened. Apparently, down here, let's go and have a look. One person apparently got an injury from dense fog. I'm not too sure how you can be injured by dense fog. Maybe it was the lamppost they walked into during dense fog. Either way, I mean, 8 people were injured by coastal wind chill, or cold/wind chill. 12 were injured by extreme cold. In Florida. Maybe they got trapped in a freezer. Who knows? So let's go and make this data look pretty, because that's the whole point of data analytics, isn't it? We get some data, we filter some data down to make sense of it, and then we actually just make that thing look pretty so that other people can understand it. Well, let's just do a top 5 for a start. Okay, so it's just going to take the top 5, check that out, run that. Whoop, recognition error occurred. Top 5 by injuries direct, because we need to tell it to give me a top 5 by something. Okay, let's do that, and let's do a render as a pie chart. Actually, no, let's do a bar chart first. Let's do a bar chart. All right, bar chart. There we go. Thunderstorms, hails, lightning, wind, heavy rain, and drought in a bar chart. Fun. And let's do a pie chart. And let's go and run a pie chart on there. There you go. Pretty straightforward, right? It's basic Kusto stuff. Now, of course, looking up at storm events isn't going to work very well for your job. But what are you going to really look at in your jobs? Normally, if you're a sysadmin, a lot of people are going to be hitting up Log Analytics Workspaces. Okay. So the idea of Log Analytics Workspaces, or LAW, Log Analytics Workspaces, is they are a location where we can, feed logs into. So what is a log? In this sense, you've got logs or metrics. Maybe you've got something like Azure AD, all right? And maybe people are logging into Azure AD, or there's group creation, or people are getting deleted, or passwords are changing. All of those are going to be individual logs. Those could be fed into Log Analytics Workspaces. Maybe you've got, for example, Azure Audit. No? This Azure Audit is going to have things like create virtual machine, delete virtual machine, create virtual network, make IP range in virtual network. Those are all logs. You can even get pretty granular with this stuff as well. Interestingly, if you've actually got virtual machines that live inside your Azure environment, whether these virtual machines are running on Linux or whether these virtual machines are running on Windows, what you can actually do is you can pass logs from inside the operating system into a Log Analytics workspace. That's fun. So inside Linux machines, you've got syslogs. Inside Windows, you've got event logs. Okay, you can pass those all into Log Analytics workspaces. You can even do that if maybe you've got one of these things called an office. Now, for those who've been working from home for the last couple of years because of the incident, the office was that place with the bad lighting and the terrible coffee. Either way, you might have virtual machines living inside the office. You can drop an agent inside these virtual machines, little MSI file for Windows, and a bit of a wget and a binary for Linux, and you can pass logs all the way back to the Log Analytics workspaces directly over the internet via HTTPS. This is really, really freaking powerful. Because what we've essentially got here, when we're looking at a log analytics workspace, what is it at this point? It's basically a big database. It's a big database of logs. And what do we do with databases? We query them. How do we query log analytics workspaces? We use Kusto to do so. And this is where people sometimes get a bit freaked out with it. Now, I'm going to bring up here not the Azure Data Explorer. This was just looking at some standard data. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go into this. This is a log analytics workspace query pane. All right. What I'm in here is a demo log analytics workspace environment. If you go here, which is the log analytics tutorial section of learn.microsoft.com, you will find a button that says log analytics demo environment. If you click on that, you will end up with this, which is essentially just a query space, and there's a bunch of data inside it. Look, it looks like the same as Azure Data Explorer. Look, in Azure Data Explorer, there's a table. What have we got here? We've got a bunch of information. Maybe we want to go and have a look at, for example, security and audit. Okay, that's fine. Security alert table. Interesting. Okay, let's go run that. Nothing found in the last 24 hours. Well, that doesn't particularly help me, Microsoft. Okay, let's try a different one. Let's try a security event table down here. Let's run that. What have we got? Oh, running your query. Taking its time. It's crunching. It's whirring. Showing the first 30,000 results. Okay, there's a lot of sample data in here, but as you can see, that sample data for time-generated account type computer, it's just table data. It's the same stuff, okay, that you just saw. It's the same over here as it is over here. This is why it's not particularly scary. It's scary when you first look at it and you don't quite know what to type here. It's very scary when the very first things you see is you see sample queries and you start to look at things like top 3 browser exceptions, and you think, what the hell's going on here? But when you really break down these queries, if you go to, for example, security event, let's just select the top 1,000. Top 1,000 by time generated. So that's the most recent top 1,000 bits of information in there. Go and run that, and hopefully it will return a query a lot faster. There we go. It's returned it in 1 second rather than 12. Fun. All right, maybe we want to go and filter some things down here. Let's go and project. Again, we'll use the same type of commands as we used before. We don't want to see all of this information. We want computer, we want time generated, and we want the event ID. Okay, sweet. There we go. Bunch of computers, bunch of events that have happened. All right. Maybe we want to just filter down to one single event ID, event 8002. That's cool. So let's just do a where command, where event ID is equal to 8002. Now let's really think about what I'm actually doing here that makes this really, really powerful. If you go back to this concept, where you actually have agents sitting on virtual machines, and you have virtual machines that are running full operating systems that are passing their information back to the log analytics workspace, by doing this Kusto query and saying, hey, which machines have event ID 8002 on them? It now doesn't matter if I've got 1, 2, 3 virtual machines, or 1,000 virtual machines, or 10,000 virtual machines that might be on multiple offices, multiple different locations, even multiple different clouds. It doesn't matter as long as I feed all of their information back to this one single location. So imagine that for tracking things like security events. Very, very useful. Or trying to track problems in your data center. So maybe we want to go and summarize this a little bit more. So let's do a summarize, and let's give a name for the column. Let's do event ID 8002. So that's just going to name the column. We'll do a count on here. We'll use the count function, and we'll count it by computer. Okay, so we should be able to see here which computers, here we go, DC11, have this specific event ID on them. Maybe we want to sort that information because it's not coming back particularly right. So let's just sort it by event ID 8002. Run that. There we go. Yes, it is DC1, this top one. That's fine. And let's go and do a render of a bar chart. Give me a bar chart. Boom. Easy mode. Okay. So this is really looking at some information, playing with some data, filtering some data down, and kind of displaying it in something that makes sense to somebody. This is also used in other sections like workspaces, workbooks within Azure to display this data. And you can pass this information maybe to your dashboarding system as well, which could be this kind of thing here. You could go and maneuver some of these onto your dashboards. That's the basics of Kusto. Now, should you want to go further and check out more information in regards to Kusto, if you come to the Kusto query language documentation, you will find that there isn't actually a location for the Kusto query language on its own. It's actually sublisted underneath the Azure Data Explorer documentation space. So it's actually down here. And there's a lot of information in regards to it. Microsoft also actually have something called the Data Explorer. Let's go to YouTube's and let's have a quick look here at Data Explorer. Jump straight in there. And if we go to Azure Data Explorer, they have a lovely YouTube channel. Hashtag like and subscribe, usual sort of stuff. And they've released this called the Kusto Detective Agency. Now, this is a cool little web game. It's on detective.kusto.io, and if we drop into detective.kusto.io, this is going to give us a database to play with, and it's a game where you can be a Kusto detective and solve crimes by using big data analytics. And it talks you through creating your own free clusters, and then it talks you through actually creating databases, merging stuff, actually running Kusto queries. So if you're looking for a tutorial for Kusto that you can follow through, now that hopefully you're not scared of Kusto, try detective.kusto.io. And that is a basic introduction to Kusto. And hopefully that should be using KISS because it's keep it simple, stupid.